So, welcome, Diane. Um, I'm really happy that you wanted to spend this time today and talk to me about the subject that I think it's maybe the main thing that I think about these days, every day, from morning till evening. Um, and the last interview I did last week with Bruce Perry, I learned, or I thought that maybe this time I should put a few words to why I've asked for your time and sort of like what is my motivation to do these interviews. And I think I can say it like this, that um, I really, my motivation or my drive is to do something to start, like how can we create a more natural, human friendly, loving environment to live in, basically something that's actually more healthy for the human and for the planet. And I think we're lots of people around the planet who feel like this and who have been wanting many things to change for many years. But the reason why I wanted to speak to you, and the reason why I'm doing this sort of interview series, is to start speaking with people that maybe have like some ideas, like how can we actually go about it, how can we actually sort of like hands-on start to make new structures, do different things that are more healthy for us. So, and how I met you, I should maybe also say, is that I was at a demonstration in Copenhagen some weeks ago, and then at one point you were there and you gave a speech, and it was like somehow the angels started singing for my ears, because I was like, ta-da, this is the kind of like somebody actually speaking wisdom, I feel like saying, instead of I think a lot of us, because we're so how do you say this, like moved is not the right word, but there's just so many things going on right now where you go like, why are they doing this, and there's a lot of anger coming up. Then for me it was just wonderful, somebody coming out and speaking more wisdom, I feel like saying. So that's why I asked you if you wanted to do this interview. But maybe Diane, maybe you want to put a few words to like what you do. I know you've been like investigating how to. I feel like saying like investigating how to create a different society for like 40 years or something, I think you said. But maybe you can explain it better than I can, what it is that your interest actually is.
Well, let's start there. Maybe later I say something about who I am, which is less interesting. Yeah, this 40 years it's not as if I've been creating it. I call it, in some speeches I was asked to hold, I call it the government in waiting, because I feel in the last 40 years, since I've heard about this impulse for what one calls in English the Threefold Society, I felt that this is the answer. When I heard about it, I was just completely inspired and thought, this will happen tomorrow. Everybody needs to know about it. And in some ways, I haven't been doing this 40 years, what you were saying in the beginning, thinking about it from morning to evening. But there was many days of thinking and reading and trying to understand. And Rudolf Steiner called it an impulse, not an idea. It's an impulse. It's a spiritual intention for society to recreate, after these ideas of the sectors being independent and sovereign, and the people working in them are independent and sovereign. So the threefold sector idea was first initiated as clearly as he did it after World War I. But Rudolf Steiner spoke about impulses for recreation of society already much earlier in the 1900s. And for those who don't know who he was an Austrian philosopher and scientist who ended up having a huge amount of following because he was teaching. And the teaching went through all aspects of life, from especially after World War I, to people who are coming saying, do you have any ideas for us? We need to make new schools. the first one being a factory owner. His name was Emil Molt. People saying, what about agriculture? That was in 24. And other people saying, what about this? What about that? And he was kind of rolling out ideas and help for those people who were asking him. But one of the things he really rolled out independently, I think not many people were really asking, but then more and more were asking, was this idea of the three sectors after World War I, where he actually wrote memorandums and sent them. One of them is called the Aufruf an das deutsche Volk, so the call to the German folk or people, that there are ideas or impulses which we can use to understand society as we have it today, and then use them to figure out how to recreate it out of our own needs. Because one of the main things to think about is society as we have it was never really created out of our own needs. It was created to the needs of the people who were in power and to shape us, to try to shape us from without. And this may have had its validity, or it may have been a correct thing to do in ancient Egypt and ancient Greece or whatever. But coming more and more to modern times, now 2000 years plus since Christianity, or not quite, 2000 years since Christianity, mankind is becoming more and more individualized. We are more independent. We are more self-sufficient inside ourselves. We don't listen to what our parents say anymore. Even when we're kids, we're already independent, We don't feel ourselves connected to a folk or to a big family like the Germanian and Scandinavian tribes. They decide everything within this family of 100 or maybe 150, 200 families. And what the family decided, that was it, that was the law. But that was based already then on internal sovereignty of each individual. Everybody had the sovereignty. So they decided things in consensus with each other. There was not a democracy where 35% could be against and the rest were for, and you had to live with things you didn't believe in. No, they believed everybody knew the law was inside of them. So we can even learn from those old societies, like those tribes, for what we need to do in the future, I think, but we have to take into account that we are extremely individualized. And that you probably noticed in all your talks with friends. It's very hard to be on one line, or if you work in a group, it gets even more difficult. Everybody has their ideas, their thoughts, and it's very hard to kind of localize around something or concentrate. And to have a feeling inside for what's the next step. So this seminar you took part in, I thought it was really a great seminar because in the end, I really didn't do that much, but just kind of could ask questions. And it seemed like there was a huge activity going on. And that's one of the main, what would I call it? That was the main, when you talk to different people about the threefold ideas and so on, many people say, well, Rudolf Steiner never said how to do this or how to do that or how to do that. And I always think, you guys, he sends you to architect school, pays for it, buys you the materials, gives you some paper to make blueprints, and then you're going, oh, he didn't tell us how to make the house, So that's where we have to be active. We have to say, okay, are these ideas something that could bear fruit? And can we find the way to implement it, or not implement it from without, but really implement it from within? Do these ideas meet our needs today? That's the first question. And then if we decide, yes, they do meet our needs, are there means of implementation and bringing it to realization? So that's a little bit of the background. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think I did. You didn't say much about who you were, but you said something other.
Yeah. Okay. So when I heard about this, as I said, about 40 years or more than 40 years ago, I thought this is extremely interesting and maybe the most important thing I'd ever heard up to then. I was quite interested as a young person in politics and what was going on in the world. It was very my father is Greek, so there was politics were always discussed everywhere around the table, and at the families gatherings, they would discuss and argue very heatedly over almost any issues. But the American society in those days didn't have too little issues to discuss. There was Vietnam War, and there was the peace movement, and there was the death of all these presidents and Martin Luther King. So there were many, many things being discussed, the impeachment of a president and so on and so on. So I grew up in this atmosphere, and was also very interested in politics. And in that way, my life, although I'm not a politician, or I ended up going into first agriculture and then me, which is an art form, and dance, and teaching it as a teacher. And then now working with handicapped children or their parents and families. In any case, this has always been kind of like under a deep river, flowing. And I met some people a few years ago, and they said, "Oh, we met you many years ago." I said, "Oh, I don't know when." "Yeah, but we met you on the train." I said, "Oh, I don't remember." And they said, "Yeah, well, you were talking about that threefold stuff." I thought, "Oh,
oh, that was me."
So has always, I know it's true that somehow people say, well, it's your hobby horse. It's not a hobby, and it's not a horse. It's a river, and it's the government in waiting, in my opinion, because, as you say, people don't know how to start. But once you start to have the understanding that there are three actual sectors that work differently, or they have different substance, and we're not used to thinking of the social life as having a substance. It's just sort of this vague blur, the social life is a blur for our understanding. And to start to kind of feel your way into it, that this social life has substance, and the structure and the substance can be healed in a more positive direction. Let's say by using the word of what is true healing. True healing is when it comes from within. I mean, I can bang you with chemotherapy and cortisone therapy and anti-inflammatories and radiation and this and that if you have a tumor, but in the end your body knows how to heal. And we heal ourselves from 10,000 cancer cells a day. We throw them out. I've heard from scientists in any case. So our body throws them out, but when the body is not able to throw them out anymore, they can go over into kind of an independent growth within our body. So healing from within is something different. And anyone who's gone through it knows what I mean, that actually when you start to heal from a serious illness, something happens inside you. And this is where we need to help ourselves and society to start to heal from inside, where people say, oh, this is something that has to do with me. I'm here today in this corona crisis because I didn't do something 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 days ago, 40 years ago. I didn't do it. And I don't want to call Rudolstein a prophet, but he said it very clearly. As long as society doesn't see this and start to try to manifest it, society will continue to go into the abyss. Chaos, destruction will continue. And unfortunately, he was right. It would have been nice if he was wrong, but it's not the case. World War II came about, and since then we have constant wars going on. Yeah. And destruction of society, destruction of civilizations, destruction of continents, and their, let's say, the beauty of all these different countries, which still sort of existed when I was a child and I could read National Geographic and watch these programs, but those things are more or less gone, So societies like the differences of Yugoslavia, the differences of Africa and Asia and so on, we're all running around with Coke cans and wearing some kind of Nike t-shirts. So one is kind of erase society by Americanizing it, not even American in that way, but with products, just commercializing the whole world. So this is something we don't even realize. We don't cry about it every night, but we should be, we should be crying all night that we destroy the variety of the civilizations and societies which existed even still 50 years ago. So the threefold ideas, that's...
Yeah, I was just about to.
That's all I want to talk about.
Because you're already going there. So maybe one thing and thank you, Diane, so much for sharing all of this. So just for people who listens, I also want to add that the seminar that you were just talking about, where I was also, is that you also do these now. You actually do these seminars where people can come and share their ideas and learn also a lot from Rudolf Steiner's knowledge, I guess I can say it like this, or in like, how do we use this wisdom? How do we create a better society, basically? I just wanted to add that. And then then I wanted to ask you if maybe you would explain to us this threefold idea, in like, if it's possible to do it in a simple way. I know it's a big subject, but that's my question.
Yeah, of course, it's a big subject. And for those who are interested and want to read, there's there's hundreds of lectures, books, and letters and articles. A lot of articles were also, there were a lot of publications in those days. And there's a lot of reading material. But in essence, how to say it in a short way, in essence, we talked about a little bit in the seminar that it's not just a blur, society, if I say it now in my own words, it's based on interactions. Where are we together? When we're not in society, now we know we die, like old people are dying in droves in the old people's homes because they can't even say hello to each other anymore. But everybody knows being alone is almost like a death sentence. And when I lived in East Germany, we had, in the school I was working in, we had discussions with parents who want to bring their kids into the schools. And in these talks with parents, it was not unusual to hear from parents. And I mean, if like I say one class of first graders, there were maybe 3 or 4 who said, well, my child got an ear infection when he was 2 or 3, and they put him in the hospital, and I wasn't allowed to visit them because in communist times you couldn't visit your child in the hospital. And when I got the child home, he was banging his head at night on the pillow, or he's banging his head against the wall on the pillow, or he's doing this thing called rocking in his bed, and it never stopped. So this also shows us how dependent we are on contact and interaction. And for a child to be taken away from his parents at a certain age, or, this starts already with 0, day 1, and goes on to maybe even 10, 12, where you really aren't independent from your parents enough to have some form of what they call hospitalization as a kind of long-term Schaden, what's the word for it? Long-term damage of that kind of treatment or hospital. It's called hospitalization, in English. So we need interactions. We need each other. We're depending on it, and in a much deeper way than we can even imagine. So then to try to say, okay, it's something we're completely dependent on, and then start to look at it. And I sometimes say, if we imagine the whole history about anatomy and physiology. So anatomy and physiology really started to move, not with dissection, meaning cutting the bodies and taking them apart, and looking at all that red and meaty stuff, and trying, but really started to move forwards in understanding when one realized there are 3 basic systems. We have the nervous system, we have the digestive system, and we have the heart and rhythmical system. So even I learned this somewhere in the 4th or 5th grade, that there's 3 main systems. Maybe now they don't teach it, but they used to teach it then in school. So these 3 main systems kind of move things forward, because you could see in this mess of blood and whatever you see in the dissection room, that there are 3 main systems that work a little bit independently of each other. They have their own areas. The brain is completely closed in, and it has these strands that go out from the spinal cord into the rest of the body, and they're very enclosed in nice little sheaths, you know. There's not much blood in there. They're kind of on their own. They have their own way of moving. So we see that within the organism, it's not a blur. For us, our understanding, it's a complete blur, what's going on in there, but it's very highly organized. So for our understanding of society, it is still a blur. But once we start to see, oh, there's kind of a nervous system. Oh, there's kind of a digestive system. Oh, there's sort of a rhythmical and distribution system, circulation system. Then we start to get eyes for what's going on. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, it does. It
does. All right. So
what I'm hearing you saying, Diane, is that what we can look into is like, how can we create society so that it matches, I almost feel like saying, like the human body, like with this, because that's sort of nature. It's innate, or how do you say, like it's, am I understanding it correctly? That
yeah, I'm match it in a way, but I was more using it in a metaphor way to say, okay, we have these three in ourselves, and they're very distinct. They're very distinct, and once you know they're there, you know what to look for. If you're going through this process of being an anatomist or physiologist, you know what to look for. You know there's certain laws going on. There's no laws of nature, and you start to see how things are working. In society, of course, it has to correspond to us. Why should it correspond to anything else? You know, why should it correspond to anything but what we are? And the most highly developed part of us is our physical body. Our soul life is much less organized. You might know that every day. I know it every day. Wake up, what was I going to do today? And if my physical functioning was dependent on the level of my, let's say, soul development, it would be a disaster. So the body is much more highly functional than our psychological emotional life. So the psychological emotional life is behind, but it still also has three main functions. We think, we have a feeling life, and we have the life of willing and doing. This is just basic, you know, we learned it sort of maybe in school, and Rudolf Steiner spent a lot of time trying to relate this very different functions that we have also at the soul level and how they relate to our physical body. We have a psychosomatic, hermetic, sealed connection between our soul life and our physical body. But modern science doesn't want to look at that. They just look at molecules, or they look at cells, or they look at, you know, they create CERN, those, what are they called? Those around the world, or here there's one in Sweden, in Lund, there's one in Switzerland, where they have the accelerators for splitting matter.
Yes, I don't know what it's called, but
in German it's a Beschleuniger. Yeah, it goes faster and faster, and then they want to try to split the matter. So even if you see pictures of this CERN, you think, oh my goodness, this looks really amazing. And then you try to make the jump from all those tubes and all those amazing miles and kilometers of whatever it is inside there, and you want to make a jump between those things and the internal understanding, and you don't find it. How am I going to understand the world better just because they can move some bits of matter faster and faster with huge magnets through these huge tunnels or small tunnels, and kilometers and kilometers of movement? And then my understanding of the world is going to get better. Who can understand what's going on in those things, you know? So we've taken this huge step of not believing in ourselves. Not realizing that the human being has the most highly developed sensory system based on all these different systems. They tell us in school it's only 5, but we have actually many more senses that we're not so strongly aware of. Rudolf Steiner describes them as 12, and once you know there's 12 sensory systems, or we have 12 senses, you start to realize, oh yeah, I do have that one. I do have a sense for my own movement. I have a sense for warmth. I have a sense for thought. I recognize thought, and so on. I recognize speech. That we are very highly developed. We have sensory system and we have this amazing thinking. So that's where we have to get back to, our senses and our thinking. And if we trusted those things, we wouldn't be in a corona crisis, because we would not trust an electron microscope to tell us anything about illness. We just wouldn't be there. Or a PCR test that has to 35 times multiply. What are they talking about? You know, if I see a person, I should be able to find out if he's finished. You know, we have the highly developed sensory system, and we have the most high developed understanding, and no apparatus is going to be better at it than we are. It might give us some more information, but in the end, we have to take that information back to ourselves, use our observation, use our thinking, and find out if someone is ill. So this whole idea, is it in us? Is it outside of us? How to really reform society based on an understanding. So the first step in the threefold idea is observation. And we do see, without too, I don't have to suggest it. It's not something anyone made up or Rudolf Steiner made up. He's just pointing out, yes, we do have a cultural life. We do have a whole part of society which we don't think is productive today. They don't make money, you know. So let's cut out music in schools. Let's cut out art in schools. Let's cut out the whole art and sciences in the universities and turn it all into business and economics, you know. This is not a joke.
No, I'm aware.
You know, American universities from 50 years ago and today, nobody studies liberal arts anymore. Everyone goes right to something that hopefully will make money. It used to be business and economics, and then it went over to IT. And now it's gone completely over to the whole artificial intelligence wave. So that the cultural life is the actual productive life, because it's out of our growth, internal growth, spiritual growth, internal understanding, that we can actually create something new. So one calls it non-productive, but it is the productive life. So it doesn't make money because it doesn't produce shoes and computers and telephones and whole IT systems. But all those things would never be there if we didn't have a really flourishing cultural life. So if we don't realize that the cultural life is our actual core, then we're going to start losing the game in the economic life. Let's put it that way. We will lose and lose and lose. So the economic life then is another area. It's also an area where we produce the physical goods that people need to survive, you know. So we produce food, we produce clothing, we produce houses, we distribute these things throughout the world. And then, you know, this economic life has gone a little bit nuts, you know. They produce things to produce. So we have to produce light bulbs that get broken in a half a year so you can buy a new one, and shoes that don't hold, and computers that don't work. And even Henry Ford knew that he could produce a car that would last for 120 years, but they didn't let him do it anymore. It was already, he's the first car maker, and they were already fighting with him, the industrialists, because what's the use of making a car that lasts forever, because we can't keep making money on it. So we have this producing to produce in order to keep the production going. So he was trying to make people aware there is the economic life, which has to follow different internal needs of the society than the cultural life, because the cultural life has a different substance. It has a different structure. It's not producing goods directly. We can't let people go to university so that they're better at making money. It's two different worlds. Let's keep them apart. Let's put some borders there, just like the body does it. That's what I always say. The body makes organs. They have membranes. They have sheaths around them. There's a pericardium. There's a Perimuseum. That means there's an external border. That means here's the muscle, outside is the connective tissues. So it has a certain border. And you guys, rest of the body, you respect it or I'm going to get sick. You know, it's just that like that. If the blood-brain barrier breaks down, I'm going to get sick. Yeah. So that's the way the body works. Keep the borders. We share things. Bring me what I need, but keep the rest out. And allow me to have a working space. And then between these production, we have the cultural life, which is it needs to flourish. We need to have freedom to know what to think, to bring new things. So that's where the very simple word, the structure of the cultural life is freedom. It's the substance, it's the way we have to be in that life. Otherwise, if we're telling people what to think, how to behave, how to be, how to create, how to be an artist, you don't get anything out of it. Everybody knows this, you know, and therefore any society who really seriously tried it is going to meet the destruction of its own civilization. Because everything in society is based on development, coming further. Nobody wants to stay the way we are. We all have an internal drive in ourselves, unless we've sufficiently been pacified through the external society. And unfortunately, we have been to a huge degree. They start pacifying us from school or with the pacifier, put it in the child's mouth instead of letting him cry, you know. So we are kind of ingrained pacifiers to children, and we let ourselves be pacified. So, but still, to get back to that feeling that without the freedom of the individual, the whole cultural life will start to sort of go into decay, won't develop further. One will not have respect for the spiritual needs of the individuals in the society, and won't feel that it's a necessity. It's a huge necessity. It's like, it's just as necessary as having water and food on the table. Otherwise, we just kind of die into some kind of, I don't know what one we would call it, if we really didn't allow people more and more to have access and time and for an internal finding their path in the cultural life. So really describing this cultural life, what is the laws? The law is freedom, you know, and then finding out, well, what belongs to cultural life? Anything belongs to cultural life that does not produce goods and service. I mean, goods, let's put it that way. Services that have to do with distribution of natural products, which are transformed to be a product which something can come on the table or be worn on the body or used for keeping the physical life going. We can't live alone from the culture. Maybe there were a few who could earlier, but it's not the masses, and I'm not promoting it either. No. So we still have this economic needs. We have needs for the physical needs, the food, the clothing, and so on. Those are another kind of need. And the way we supply the one is different than the other. We have to respect the need for freedom to supply the cultural life. We have to respect the understanding in the economic life that it's based on something different. It's based on the fact that it works much better if we work together. So that in the seminars, I try to make these little thought exercises of making the pair of shoes. How long would it take you to make a pair of shoes? If you did everything you have to do, self-sufficient for making that pair of shoes, if we're starting with getting the animal, we have to make the weapons, right? to hunt an animal or make a bow and arrow and learn how to use it. So the process, so many people say maybe half a year. I don't know if I'd be finished in a year if I worked full time getting those shoes on my feet. but people used to do it, and they stopped doing it, not because they didn't like making shoes, but it's much more efficient if we make shoes for each other. If other people make shoes and I'm free to do the things I'm good at doing. So therefore we have this matrix of production going on, partially good, partially unnecessary, what's going on around the world, but where things are mined in Africa, they are moved to China, they are recreated in somewhere else, and then they're moved again, and then they're moved again, and then they're put together somewhere else. So this very intricate production lines that are going on, but there everybody's working on it. If I get a smartphone and have it in front of me, I don't know how many thousands of people worked on their phone. From the thought side, from the understanding side, from the development side, from the this side, that side, it's probably even hundreds of thousands. And then those who mined the stuff and moved it and brought it and so on. So that already shows us we're connected. So there, to understand the substance of or the structure of the economic life, it's some kind of altruism and brotherhood. We do things for each other. We're always working for each other. So in today's society, what do we have there? We have, the invisible hand of Adam Smith. Maybe you didn't hear about it, but the invisible hand is one of the first promoters of the free market system. And now I don't remember the exact year, but sometime back in the 1700s, he promoted his 1700 something or other. He promoted the idea and was very successful. He wrote The Wealth of Nations and some other books, successful in the means that the ideas haven't disappeared. So his idea, more or less, very shortly, you can find in Wikipedia, it says more or less this way too. If we allow each man or woman to follow their egoistic interests in the economic sphere, then it will have the best effect for everybody. So we need to allow it to be free. And then he calls it the invisible hand. So this invisible hand will create a balance in the market. So then what they call the English words for it, supply and demand, will balance everything out. The one who can create for the cheapest price, he will win, everyone else will lose, but that will be better for everybody. So there's a kind of wish, which was typical for mankind at that moment, to have everything regulated through invisible forces. So one created this whole materialistic society thought, like we are only material, we are only made of atoms. Everything that happened in evolution was just by chance. There was the primordial mud and lightning came in and a one-cell organism started. And then after so many hundreds of thousands of years, it mutated. This is how they told me in university. It mutated and there were two-cell organisms and that keep mutating. So it's all by some freak and chance of nature. So the materialistic thought took more and more, what could I say? It got ground, it got traction. And then one created this kind of invisible force of the market. So this invisible force, you can find also somewhere in the text that, well, for those people who don't have land, they will at least have something to eat. So then one went further and actually put it into words that there were landowners. Those landowners were never happy with what they had, or they gave themselves everything. That was the church and the royalty. And there were those who didn't have land. So this has been an age-old conflict, having land and not having land. And the invisible hand of Adam Smith was going to cure that problem, because those who didn't have land would at least be able to work for some kind of small amount of money in the new coming industrialized society and get something out of it, meaning food and a place to live, a shelter. So if you kind of dig a little bit, even just 5 minutes on Wikipedia, into the invisible hand, you realize do we really want an invisible hand to rule society? Or what do we imagine as this invisible hand? Do you understand what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
I understand, and I'm thinking I don't like it.
Don't like it. Yeah, it's very good for capitalists, you know, because
Yeah.
they know what to do with that invisible hand. They are the invisible hand. So
Mm.
the huge capitalistic families that own the 99% of the world by now, they
Mm.
knew how to use the invisible hand. They were very good at it. And they, you know, some people also got rich and could buy 5 Teslas or whatever they do. You know, some people can get rich in this invisible hand system, but then they're always ahead. If you follow things a little bit, they're always ahead in figuring out how to earn even more.
Yeah.
Because they can never stop, you know. So first there were stocks and bonds, and then there were obligations and futures, and then there were, maybe not saying everything correct, there were derivatives and hedge funds and so on. So there's all these new systems for capitalizing society, turning everybody in society to something they can make money on.
Mm.
There's no satisfaction. So then we have the Great Reset in front of us, where even they know their system will always fall, because you can't keep building bubbles on bubbles on bubbles.
No.
So at some time, one bubble is going to burst and everything will fall. So they know it's going to fall, and they would like to control the falls as well. And I have, you know, people I like and respect telling me, yeah, but Diane, you know, you have to invest in gold and silver and crypto because the smart ones are going to win, and you can win something out of the crisis. I'm like, well, you know, maybe I could use my my thoughts for winning out of this crisis, but this is not where I want to go with it. You know, I don't want to invest, because I know if I invest, somebody is going to divest. They're going to lose.
Mm.
And I don't want to treat my fellow men and women with this kind of activity. I want to see how we can move each other to saying we can create an economic society which takes care of each other as a basis. We already do take care of each other, but why should some people get the trickle down? So that's where all these other, you know, theories, Keynes and trickle down economics and Ayn Rand economics, whatever you want to call them, they all come in. It's all based on, well, if the capitalists have more, then the rest will have something. And unfortunately, their lust, their desire for more is kind of insatiable. And now it's gone over to, well, we want to control everything. You will have nothing and you will be happy.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll have everything and we'll also be happy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He said it in the perfect way. They'll have everything. But they will be able to capitalize on every interaction. So that's where, you know, you asked about this, the government. So they managed.
But maybe I really want you to go on and say what you're about to say, Diane. But there's something I just want to add, is that, so a friend of mine, she often talks about this thing, like, you know, when the body gets cancer and how the cancer cells eat all the other cells.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow I find that this way of describing it is really good in this instance. Like, because I'm also aware that we're still missing one leg of these. We only did 2 now, right? We're still missing the third. But somehow what I've been thinking, listening to you talking about these things, is that, so right now, and I was just thinking it again now when you talked about this invisible hand. So right now we have a system or systems in this world where you can say that the whole world has cancer, basically. I would say like the cancer cells has just gotten completely out of control and they're eating all the other cells. And so the question is like of course I've been thinking, like, first of all, we have to wake up and realize, oh, we have cancer. Actually, there is cancer in the body. And then second of all, like this thing that we're speaking about now, like, then how do we then, you know, of course, apply a different system that makes sure that we don't get cancer again, is actually what I want to say. That both keeps the body healthy and also helps us, so that when the ego stuff that we all have, you know, when it gets a little bit out of control, that there is a system or a culture, I would say, that makes it impossible for it to get too much out of control, for the unhealthy parts of us to get too crazy. Does it make sense what I'm trying to say? I know I'm not asking a question. I'm sort of just sharing my thoughts, what it makes me think of when you share what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. No, cancer is a good kind of example, or it's a good comparison, that in that way that the economics took over everything,
yeah,
and kept growing. So they were happy to use the invisible hand to buy off governments and turn them into corporations.
And please say something about that, actually, because that's the other thing. I know you were about to say it, and I really could you
Well, that fits with cancer perfectly, so it's a good place to start. So buy off, I mean, everybody's always known that they buy off politicians, you know, but they actually managed to turn every government into a corporation. And Dun & Bradstreet website is a good one to study if you want to just spend 10 minutes in Dun & Bradstreet website, and you'll see, I think their slogan is "in the business of government." Mm-hmm. So then the question marks or the red flags would start to going up by then. Otherwise, in the Danish ones, you can see things like Aarhus Kommune and the subsidiaries. So a commune incorporated 2007. So when they told us they were putting the communes together in Denmark, they were actually incorporating the communes or reincorporating them. I don't know if they were already incorporated before then, but at least they all say incorporated 2007, meaning turned into some kind of corporation or recreated. So that's why I don't have the whole knowledge by now, but that's right now for what I need enough for me. 2007. So that means there's somewhere in corporations means stockholders, stakeholders, and whether these communes are connected higher into the government, into the Folketing, and so on, into our bigger government, or whether they have stakeholders and stockholders which are able to buy in. I mean, I haven't gone into the depths of Dun & Bradstreet because I don't want to, but one day I will probably pay to go in and see what you can find behind the free information. But they're the ones that help stakeholders and stockholders to find businesses to invest in. That's what Dun & Bradstreet is about. So it's about investing. So somewhere there's probably investors, or in the governments, who they are and so on. The researchers can start to find out. And then they have subsidiaries. That means and Aarhus Kommune, they say we're in the business of childcare, we're in the business of schools. So they actually call it business. So there's things that they do. So then they have smaller, what you say, the daughter subsidiaries, smaller corporations within the big corporation.
Yeah.
So it's all about, in the end, making money. Then another place to go is try to understand the trust accounts, which they turned us into. So everybody is also made into a trust account or a kind of merchant or business. We don't know about that. So there's all these hidden businesses going on, so they can make more and more money on every interaction. So if you get a ticket, they ask you for your name and they ask you for your CPR number and so on and so forth. And then they can actually go to your trust account and get money. So you pay and your trust account pays too. That's pretty good business, I think. You know, so there's all these hidden businesses going on around us, and they sell it. Started years ago. I mean, in America, they started privatizing the prisons. I remember about 40 years ago, and called it public-private partnerships. And this name has come to Denmark also in the meantime. But where everything was just being privatized under the guise of, well, it's going to be more lucrative, or it's better for the government. They were selling it in this way, saying it's better for you, the taxpayer, if it's privatized, because there will be more incentive to do it better. The incentive to do it better didn't tell us also incentive for those ones to make money. No. So in America, for example, one of the biggest businesses is not only prisons, that's a lucrative business, but child protective services. So where they take children and get tons of money going through the removal of children from the families. So we have also this very kind prime minister in Denmark who says she wants 52,000 children in.
Yeah, I heard.
Some weird numbers, so I don't know how many children are born in Denmark a year, but it won't take many years to have all the children in the state care. Mm-hmm. So there must be some money in this. Yeah. There must be huge amounts of money. Otherwise, which government is going to pay for all these children? It's very expensive to put children in care, take them away from their families. So once everything's a business, then it's supposed to be good. The free market hand is supposed to be something very positive, but they've turned all the governments into business. And one can find the threads or how they register themselves as businesses in the United States Security and Exchange Commission. You can find some of the governments, you can find them on Dun and Bradstreet, you can find them registered as foreign governments in the European Investment Bank. The stockholders are governments of Europe. And then that whole thing is registered as a foreign government in America. So once one's done that, one's left the sphere. So that, let's say that sphere, you asked about the third one. The third sphere, or it's actually the middle sphere, which corresponds more to our rhythmical system, is the sphere of the rights and the judicial sphere. So anything that should be left to government, state, is kind of this middle sphere. But now the middle sphere is an abandoned ship. If all the governments have gone into corporations, they've kind of moved over into the economic sphere, and that middle sphere is abandoned. It's really an abandoned ship. Nobody's steering it. Nobody's holding the sails or the rudder. It's going wherever it wants to go, and it always likes to make more money for itself. So if we want to look at why are we in this AI age, it's because we're not useful anymore as people. We're not good at making money. We cost them too much, so why not replace them with really more subservient robots than the ones that are already working 16 hours a day in Malaysia and China to make clothes for us? We could have even more useful producers. So this middle sphere is missing, yeah. Now, you were asking about the cancer, and then I went to the governments. Okay, the governments.
Yeah, but maybe, Diane, so just to make it completely clear for anyone listening. So what we have now is like we have like this threefold system, and now I will see if I say it correctly. Please correct me if it's not. It's like there's one part is like the culture. Then there's can I call it the rights system, or what can I call it?
Yeah.
And then the third one is the economic sector. That's like, and these three, if we were to have a society that is more healthy for us than the one we have now, then these three have to be somewhat independent. That means that someone that is serving the rights sector cannot also be owning like Novo Nordisk or something, like, they can't, so that they can't work. Does it make sense what I'm saying? That you cannot be
talking about
in once.
So there may be two things to say to that. The one thing is what everybody actually knows about, called conflict of interest.
Yes.
So this word conflict of interest, everybody knows there are conflicts of interest, but we don't pay attention to that. So as soon as one health minister or whatever he was in Denmark leaves the government, he goes over to this one over there, and then they go over to Novo Nordisk, and then the other one goes here. So is this huge conflict of interest going on. But even more in the understanding, what's important is maybe you would work and have a business, but you could still be somebody who worked more in this right sphere, as long as you're doing something completely different when you're in the right sphere, that we know what we're doing, that we know what we want, and we do not allow that this right sphere is corrupted by the economic sphere. So the right sphere has to be a kind of sphere where people feel what is right. And there I really got so much inspiration by diving into this whole Gothic Germanic tribe stuff, because it was based on what people felt was right. And everybody had autonomous rights. Everybody had rights. There was no question. you had to be at this class of society to have rights, or if you were a slave, you didn't have rights. So they didn't accept slavery, you know. So when the Romans wanted to take over Northern Europe, they fought they fought for 800 years until Karl the Great, then they fell finally, but they still kept fighting, you know, because the whole idea of the Roman society, they didn't want it. So what we have all around the world, I call it kind of like an antiquated Roman society, which we accepted just by default. We couldn't say no anymore. And now we still have it. It's still hidden, it's very hidden, but in effect, most of what we have around us, it hasn't developed with mankind. It hasn't developed with our individualizing. So you spoke about ego, and ego is, you know, the whole, I would say, without wanting to criticize anything, but this kind of new age movement has done a disservice to people, because they say, well, you know, get rid of the ego. But actually, I would say, you know, we need this ego. We need to individualize. This is where mankind is going. We cannot stop that process. But once we have our I am, let's take it and use it for the universal. Let's take it and use it for the I am that is bigger than my I am. Because that will lift me into a spiritual dimension, and it will allow me to know what is the next step for other people. I have to become somebody who can hear what does my brother need and be able to act. I need to become someone who can hear what do these people need and be able to act. I think this is where we want to go. We want to be our brother's keeper. But Cain said, am I my brother's keeper, you know, to God? That's a picture for us. You have to go there with Cain and say, am I my brother's keeper? I just killed him, you know. We kill our brothers all the time. Today, this is how society is based on. But do we want to keep it going? Or do we want to say, okay, we went through that, we're still going through it, but we want to start to become our brother's keeper. So in the economic life, we have the possibility to show that we can do it. It's not hard. I mean, it will be an adjustment, but if we want it, we decide that the economic sphere is for being our brother's keeper, we will start to know what steps to make. We will start to find out what kind of money systems do we need, which don't just, you know, through all these mechanizations of the monetary system are able to make more and more and more and more money off of people and make the land price rise more and more and more and more. I mean, I was just talking to somebody who knows that 18,000 for a hectare of land is now 250,000 in less than 15 years. I mean, who's going to make carrots? In effect, we've starved ourselves to death in Denmark and other countries as well, because the land price, you cannot, in 6 generations of farmers will never make the money they need to have to pay the bank. It's ridiculous. But the money system knows how to do it when it's only thinking about itself. So we don't have to be mad at them. We're mad at ourselves that we didn't figure it out, and then figure out how to do it differently, how to do it so that we can be our brother's keepers and take care of each other in this amazing knowledge we have about how to organize the work system, how to help each other by one country who can grow cotton and the other country can do this, and how to really streamline things nicely, but still make sure everybody has enough. Because why do we need it? There's so many reasons, but one main reason, even from the economic side, we need free culture. We need the free cultural life to keep the ideas coming, keep the new impulses. Oh, how to make free energy. Wow, that would be a dangerous thing. How many people have already found out how to make free energy and they got a bullet through their head on the street or whatever happened to them? Because the economic system doesn't want free energy. It's bad for business over here. So this right sphere has to take care of that, you know, has to say, okay, we need both of these spheres that actually have a different dynamic. The one is based on freedom, individual, ego. I know what I have to do for myself to develop further. I know whether I need music. I know whether I need to go to university. I know whether I need to go to church. I know whether I need to go out to disco. I know what I need for my cultural life. The other sphere, we know what people need. We have to learn to hear over there. What do they need? What do they need, you know, to be able to have enough to actually go through the real work, which is the inner development. That's the real work. Not having food on the table. It's important, it's a necessity, but the real work is freeing up people enough to know, I have to move on. I'm not only here to sit in front of Netflix and you run around with this little apparatus in my hand, looking like an autistic child 24/7, that we're really here for something else. So there, how the spheres need to work together and at the same time have borders around them. Be able to say, okay, in this right sphere, we are here to find out that everybody is on the same level, equality before the law. No law should be made that doesn't feel equality in itself, that everyone who meets this law will feel that it's right for them. And then be able to say brotherhood in the economic sphere, but you can also look at that from the side of the right sphere. I mean, if everybody has a right even to life, do we have a right to life? That's what we have to ask ourselves. You know, after natural law, everyone has a right to life. But you don't have a right to life if you don't have a right to food.
No.
Or land, you know. So the Germans, they said everybody has a right to land. We distribute land. They didn't want the Romans because the Romans had, you know, they came with pieces of paper saying from there to there, from this stone to this stone is yours. The church gets this, the royalty gets this, we get that. So they split it all up, and the Germans were saying, no, 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 Scandinavian tribes, we share the land. You can't come with those pieces of paper. So right to land is an intrinsic right, in my opinion. You know, everybody must have a right, whether you own that land, I mean, whether you farm that land yourself, but a right to have a share of what's produced from having land should be to everybody. So the right sphere has to be strong enough to say, okay, we're going to make laws, for example, that I could see it, a money system cannot be utilized for making money for the few. A money system has to be a system which can help to distribute goods in an easy manner amongst society, so that we don't have to trade carrots for shoes and shoes for a house, or try to trade our way by sewing at home to a car. Good luck. So we have to learn to understand why money is necessary, but money is also something that without too much cleverness can be hoarded very easily. And when we take money out of the system by hoarding it, we're hurting it over here, you know, because there's less money over here. So people are hoarding it there. So people have less here. They're getting poor. They're getting richer. It will always work like this. So then there's some ideas about how to make it impossible to hoard money. Just let it die. Let it follow the production, you know. Nothing that we have lives more than so and so many years. So why not let the money die too?
Yeah, I know that's one of the things that we talked about at the seminar that you did a few weeks ago, this idea of like having an expiration date, I think it's called, like, yes. And I really thought about that a lot afterwards. I was like, it is really the only thing we have in society that doesn't die.
Doesn't die.
You can just sort of scoop it in, and then you can put it, you know, for your next family member and your next family member, and in the end you own the whole world. Like, it's what we're seeing now, that few people own the whole world.
It's effective.
Yeah, it is.
I read many years ago, that maybe 20, 30 years ago, a little article, and they said if you had invested 1 dinar at the time of Christ's birth, 1 Roman piece of money, at the normal interest of today, this piece of gold would have grown to be bigger than the earth and the moon combined in size, with interest and compound interest. So we don't really understand the banking system. We don't understand the so-called math of deception. It's a math of deception to say that money can be allowed to grow with interest. Because what's grown if the money grew bigger than the earth and the moon together? It's amazing how things grow with compound interest. So yeah, we'll let the money die. And there have been societies where the money was dying. Actually, there was a money system which went from the south of Europe up to the north, and it was in the in a very small window of, I think they were called the Conradins, one of the dynasties or the German kings had that money system. And when the Habsburgs came in, they got rid of it again. But in that money system, I was reading, they melted the money down 3 times a year. So if you had coins left and you brought them on that day, you would get new coins, but at a depreciated interest. And during that time, one managed to build, that was into the 11th, 12th century, when all the Gothic cathedrals were built. So there was, you're thinking of peasant society, but when you go and visit these places in Germany and France, and also in Italy, other areas, then you wonder how the society had so much free forces, a freed up time. Because to be able to build like that, you have to have an amazing amount of time. You have to have peasants that are not making food, but they're artisans. So they can specialize in beating on stones and making glass windows and painting and making sculptures. You can specialize in other activities because you freed up the food production and the clothes production for these so-called artisans. But in that time, when I was always wondering, how did they do it? How did they do it? Because the society was so simple in the 10th, 11th, and 12th centuries. And then I read from an anatomist, a man named Dr. Rowe, and he wrote a book about economy and also an article about this money system, which he was researching, that got melted down 3 times a year. And then when the Habsburgs came in, he says that's why all the cathedrals aren't finished. Because at that moment, they changed back to the what's called the eternal denarius, the eternal money that never dies. And then suddenly there wasn't enough money in flow. So that just is an amazing historical example to show us money needs to flow. If money flows, we are rich. If money gets hoarded, we are very poor.
Yes.
And we will get poor faster and faster and faster, the more it's allowed to be hoarded. And then within their system, it still doesn't work fast enough. So they make all these bubbles and they make all these crashes. All of those are lucrative for them. A bubble is lucrative and a crash is lucrative. And if they come quickly, you can make money here and you can make money there. But all of those make society poor. It makes us poor. It makes everyone else poor. We have less free time for following the cultural needs. We become a kind of eternal slave to some system, or we have to try to earn enough money for this and that. So we become slaves and we enslave more of society. And whether we see it directly in front of us in Denmark, maybe not yet, but if we go and look at the labels on our clothes, we know there's the hidden slaves, or even the computer in front of me, how many hidden slaves worked on this thing with horrible work hours, who didn't have time to even think about their internal developmental needs. So we do have these slaves. They're just kind of economic slaves right now, even though we don't have slaves in front of us anymore.
I will say it really is it's a challenge even talking about these subjects without getting angry. I think it's I can feel it in myself, the more you speak, the more I just go like on the other side I go like, okay, find another way. Yeah, there's one thing when what you just said, Diane, it made me think of these, because you mentioned now several times these Germanic people, I think you called them, right? And there's something, because as I said earlier, I did this interview with the guy named Bruce Perry last week, who has been living with a lot of different indigenous tribes, and specifically there are 2 groups that he mentions who live this egalitarian lifestyle where they're all equal. And when you speak about these Germanic people, I hear a lot of the same being said there, that it really is a culture and a way that you really you have to work for it. You have to preserve it somehow. You have to really take care that it stays egalitarian, that it stays like equal, but that in this way how can I say this, that the concept of sharing is like their main thing. It's like if somebody is needing something, if there's not enough food in camp or something, no one will go around like we must go and hunt some more. Or the first thought will be, who hasn't been sharing well enough?
Mhm.
Because they share everything. It's all about sharing everything, and nobody really in one way nobody really owns anything, and at the same time everyone are equal because they have equal access to everything.
Mhm.
I'm still looking into it and studying it a lot because I want to know like more about it and how we can do it. But I'm just hearing a lot of those threads when you're talking about the Germanic people, and also in this threefold system actually,
Mhm.
that makes me think of the same, that we could actually use these ideas, use these, like, I even want to say, not just ideas, but I think it's a lot of our nature. I think Bruce Perry actually, he said in that interview last week that living in this egalitarian way, like you're just talking about, like the Germanic people, is how we have been living for the majority of time on Earth. And this newer way that some people are taking the power over all the others is a quite new thought, or a quite new thing. And I don't know about this for sure, but it feels right. It feels like the truth. Um,
Well, if I would say a few words about the tribal societies.
yes.
So we have now very few, but there's still some, let's say, remnants of tribal societies. And actually the last 40, 50 years has more or less eradicated most of them. But you can still read about them and hear things and so on. But there's one thing in the tribal societies is, now not specifically talking about the Northern European societies, but let's talk about the other ones that are still kind of remnants around the world. In Australia, in the Aborigines, the Bushmen of the Kalahari, the Inuits, and so on. So these tribal societies, without wanting to make it too simple, if we just say, but it's a kind of simplified picture. If we say the Bushmen, what is the society based on as far as individualization? There's the work. If we're talking about work, there's the men's work and there's the women's work, and then there's the priest. Or the priest was also the medicine man. So he was a medicine man, he was a priest, and they call them the spiritual leader. So the Indians, the American Indians, if you read some of their things, they also say, when they wanted to take us down, they killed our spiritual leader. So they killed, the Americans didn't really have to go, they still had to have a lot of wars against the Indians, but they always tried to get the chief first, because if they knew if they took the chief, the people would kind of fall apart. And the Romans, they knew this also. So this is old knowledge. But the Bushmen, they said the same thing. I listened to some interviews with Bushmen. They said when they want to destroy our tribes, they kill the chief. They kill our medicine man, because he's the one who knows where to get water in the desert, where to hunt, when to hunt. He's the one who knows. So it's interesting that they knew that their chief has the spiritual knowledge, the connection to nature, to be able to know where to find water in the desert, because where the water comes up in the desert isn't always the same place. But this spiritual leader, he could find the water in the desert. So these people who had the connection to the higher spheres, let's say, or that had the internal knowledge to nature, they were the ones that kept the tribes together. So there you can also see that through, not only through the work, but through the individualism of the tribe mentality, we don't have that mentality. I think that this development of our individual, our I am development, is something which has gone through if we say the main Western cultural development. So if we start in India, Persia, Egypt, Rome, Greece, coming into Europe, that the individual became more and more developed. We've gone out of this kind of egalitarian consciousness, where everybody was important into where we don't feel that everyone's important. We have to work on it to understand it. We have to understand that it has a higher meaning for us inside. And so just saying egalitarian, that's also a little bit of a, let's say, this idea of being equal. I think if we look at the three sectors, it's an idea that's kind of medicinal. It's a medicinal idea if we keep it in the right sphere, but we're not egalitarian in what we need in the cultural life. We're completely different. So let's not carry it over there, because otherwise we're going to get into kind of totalitarian society if we drag it over there. Let's keep it there. And maybe let's not drag it over into the economics either, because some people are going to be very good at this. They want to work more. They want to create new factories. And some people really like this stuff. Or some people are good at organizing, and finding people who want to work. And so it's not also, if we make it all on one level, we're also going to be polluting this sphere. Does that make some sense with the idea of the egalitarian? But what you did say, it's true, children are like that. My two children, if one of them went to the dentist and got something, he would say, "Can I have one for my brother?" That was very nice, to have those two kids in front of you. And the one was always saying, "Oh, thank you, but do you have one for my brother?" Because he wasn't happy unless his brother also had one. He's not going to go home and play with a toy or eat a lollipop or whatever you get at the dentist without the brother getting one, or a balloon or something like that. So it is part of us. It's part deep necessity that everybody has something. And if we don't notice the pain, the anger, it's just because we're not noticing it. We're ignoring it. That people are starving when there's no need for starvation, and the world is being split up as if it's a checkerboard. They call it the Great Check Match. There's the book is there. They don't hide anything. It's all about gaining, but you can use the system. So they use the systems they created very nicely. Anyway, so egalitarian fits for us in the right sphere, but then if we drag it, we'll become totalitarian. If we want to drag it over here, we want to drag it over there, we'll become kind of a communistic system where if you lived or if you traveled in, for example, even the communist countries, even now, probably. Now I haven't been to Russia, but I was in Serbia quite a few years ago, but still, my God, how one managed to keep those societies behind for so many years by just, what did one do? One said, okay, the government, we like government, so let's build it out. Okay, government, we will take over the farms, we will take over the factories, we will take over this, we will take over that. So they took over everything. So that, communism was nothing new. It was actually just an extension of the idea of government being great. We're greater than all you guys out there. We're good at business. We're going to take over every business. We're good at cultural life. We'll get rid of everything we don't like that disturbs us. We'll put those people in jail. We'll kill them. We'll do whatever. Because government's great. So they just build a huge government. And in the end, people are right saying what we have now is just a huge socialism, because government, I don't know, 60% of the Danish society work in the government.
Yeah.
So I don't know who's paying the taxes, It doesn't, in my mind of economics, it doesn't go up. I don't know where the money's coming from, but we know they print whenever they need it. So it's coming from somewhere.
Yeah, that makes it easier, of course. Print some. Wow, yeah, thank you, Diane. I'm aware that we've also talked now for really a long time. So just to if somebody is still, listening to the whole thing, then maybe we should let them off the hook. But I really, really thank you for sharing all of this and all this, because I really think that this, we really have to start talking about exactly like we're doing here now, like how could it actually look? How could it look in a way that it could work? Instead of just, I hear a lot of people going like, yeah, but what can we really do? Will there not always be corruption? Why even bother trying to change anything? And And it's really like, when I speak with like Bruce Perry the other week, and now here with you, I get this like, we can actually do something, there's actually hope, So yeah, there was another thing I was just thinking. Oh yeah, and then I want to say, of course, all the things that you mentioned now here, I will find the links and put the links at the video so that people they can read more about it.
Mm-hmm.
And also one important thing I just wanted to add, because I don't think we said that maybe clear enough for people to actually understand it, is that, because I know you said that in your speak in Copenhagen, or when I was there, that because the government and the communes are actually right now all businesses, then what the laws that are making are not really laws, they're offers. I think you said it something like this. Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But as I understood your words, is that because it's an offer from a company, you don't have to take it. You can say like, thank you for your offer, but no thanks. Is that correctly understood? Like, good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's not my research, but this is from Cal Washington, from In Power Movement, that I found this out originally. And of course, it's true in all of our understanding that a government can, or a business cannot make laws.
Yeah.
So if you ask yourself, can a business make law? Everyone will say, no, of course not. But once they're a business, why are they in the business of making laws? Of course, they only make laws that are good for business. What else would they make? But so this, yeah, it's an offer. So then that's about commerce. So what Cal Washington has been sort of teaching us, and there's other people who have worked with this quite extensively for years, and he was working with these people in America and in Canada, finding out that actually what has been done through this commercializing of the governments is making it possible for everything to function within commercial law. Mm-hmm. And there is this so-called UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code. And what I understand, and which Cal Washington's understanding also, is this is a codified version of old laws, which were more customs and traditions from commerce. And that's still known today as lex mercatoria, or merchant law. So merchant law, the merchants had their own laws. Babylon had its own traditions. They worked in certain ways, and there was a lot of fairness, and they wanted truth and honor because it was good for business. If people were cheating all the time and cheating each other, there were huge consequences, and people could actually notice it. So they needed a high level of honor. And the system was such that if an offer was made, one more or less had to accept it because it's honorable to accept the offer. But at that moment the offer is made, then starts the next step of the contract, which is the meeting of the minds or the discussion. So here we have terms and conditions and things like that, which are written on every website you say yes to. So you accept the terms and conditions without reading them, of course, because who's going to read the 17 pages to get into the website? So that starts the meeting of the minds. So that's the next step of the contract. So anytime with the government is a business and they make a law, often now in Denmark, they don't even call it a law. It's called, with this whole Corona thing, it's called recommendations. They're actually always finding new names for calling rules and regulations and recommendations, and our strong recommendations and so on. So even they're a little bit wary of calling it a law. A bekendtgørelse sounds closer to a law, but a bekendtgørelse is not a law either, not in our Danish system either, because it hasn't been signed by the Queen and 2 or 3 ministers. So one's noticed there as well that they don't even follow their own laws of making laws. So many laws are not laws. So then what Cal realized is, it's all a commercial offer. And therefore they can do it outside of the law, because they're operating within this commercial jurisdiction. And we know from years gone by, there was something in, let's see, the 90s, it was called M.A.I, M.A.I. And that stood for something like multi-international upcommon or agreement for industry for trade or something. So it was like the predecessor of the TTP and the TTIP, which came later as a kind of wave to try to organize trade even more tightly and all of society under these commercial jurisdictions. So there's been huge attempts to get it even more organized. TTIP, Trump got rid of. MAI didn't go through in the 90s for some reason, I don't know, because then we didn't have a computer. It was hard to even read anything about the agreement. But I know TTIP was probably the next step. But that's kind of how to use commercial laws without us knowing about it. So it is an offer. Wear a mask, it's an offer. Have a vaccine, it's an offer. All those things are commercial offers. And we don't know it because we didn't figure it out. Cal Washington finally figured it out. Okay, the smart meters are an offer. The fact that they write it in the newspaper and that they send you a little notice in your mailbox saying we're going to come on Tuesday afternoon, that's an offer. And we don't know that it's an offer, so we don't know how to say no. We have to learn how to say no in their game. So we have to start to understand how they play and become merchants ourselves. Well, thank you very much. I know they made me into a merchant, so now I know how to be one. Or I can learn. I can start to learn. So when we know that their laws are offers, then we can move ourselves into that space. And it's a space, again, we come back to structure and substance. It's unseen, it's invisible. We will not find it in a can or a SAN accelerator. We won't find it there, but it is substantial. It has substance, it is concrete, it's reality. So they can work within this reality, which goes back to old laws and customs, going back from the Old Testament, Babylon, created in the Sumerian times, the Egyptian times, where trade really started to get going. Before those times, cultures lived very small, or as they were up here in these kind of tribal societies. So in the tribal societies, there was not much trade either. You had what the land gave and you shared it with each other. But trade between cultures was something which started in Sumeria, ancient Babylon times. That's when actual trade started. So trade is something different than a tribal society. But there, then they build their customs, they build their laws, their ways of keeping everybody fair. And those followed certain laws, and Cal realized, oh, these things are the same as the Old Testament. So then he started, many people have even made, not only Cal Washington, realized that the Old Testament is a kind of law book. It's an agreement with the higher spiritual worlds for how they should behave and do things in those times. And that commerce is based on a lot of the things there. So when they move themselves into commercial jurisdiction, so that's the words used in law, jurisdiction, then they can operate in jurisdiction and of commerce. And we think it's a law that encloses us, but they're operating in commerce, so everything they're doing is fine for them. But we don't know. They're playing another game that we don't know anything about.
That's the thing.
We're playing dice and they're playing complicated chess with 5 boards, you know. So we need to learn how they're playing. And in the end, it's not that complicated when you see it. Once you start to see it, you see it everywhere. You see, oh, actually, why does nobody needs to wear a mask? Because there is no law about a mask. Not only is it not a law, it's a recommendation. And all of these recommendations have exemptions because they cannot make a law, even in their system, which goes against the law.
No.
You can't make a law against the law, so you have to have exemptions. So there's a lot of kind of monkey business going on. And if you know the exemption, so then we have to go and read the exemption and say, oh, okay, I can do almost everything I used to be able to do. Of course, there are closing down society and creating economic disasters and all these things. But if we really understood it, we wouldn't close our shops, we wouldn't close our business, we wouldn't wear masks, we wouldn't accept a European pass or COVID pass. We would say, thank you very much for your offer. And just like anything else, you know, he's trying to sell me a car. I don't need a car now. Thanks very much. You know, I look at the newspaper, steaks for 49 cents. Okay, don't want that either.
Yeah.
It's the same. So there's two main things to think about. You cannot stand as a government and make laws and at the same time be a company. You cannot. It's simply impossible. So it's a Maya, it's an illusion. It's the great illusion. What's going on right now?
But to me, that was completely new knowledge. When you said this the first time and I heard this, oh, wow, it's actually a business. I didn't know. I mean, I knew that this whole thing was really not well, but I didn't know that it was like, this is actually a business. So I don't have to say yes. And I was, after that, I was really thinking like, you know, these are really the things. And this is why it's so great that you put so many descriptions to it, because these are really the things that we have to look through it. You know, we have to look through the illusion. We have to look through it so it can actually fall apart. Because if in the end no one is following their recommendations, or because people, they can see through it and see it's a business trying to make money. It's not a law system. I think something else will happen. So yeah, maybe all there is to do is to talk more about it and let more people know.
Let more people know. Yeah. And I agree 100%. And I agree that once we know it, we realize how powerful our thoughts are. Yeah, we realize, my goodness, and this is the thing about knowing how the government's working now, and also knowing how we want to look in the future. That's essential, because this government, so-called governments, are going to fall. They have fallen. They let themselves fall. They are creating new laws, new jurisdictions behind our backs in the areas called WHO and World Economic Forum, private, sub-private, whatever they are. You know, who created them? Don't ask. Why are they there? Don't ask. So they've tried to create a kind of phony jurisdiction, which we all accept, and it's based on acceptance. The contract always ends with unconditional acceptance. So therefore, every time we wear a mask, we are showing them we accept what they want. And once we realize what's going on, it's important to know, because it will start to fall, and it is already falling. More and more people know, and more people realize this is crazy and so on. But the other thing which we need, I think, it's our responsibility to create the next step. So that's why, you know, I started these seminars many years ago, and then there was kind of a pause, and now they're going on again. But we need to know what it's going to look like. Yeah. And that's the concrete work of the moment. And it's not abstract, it's not theoretical, it's nothing, because the future is created by us. And if we accept what they created, we get that. They've already created, they've worked for years, you know, they've been working on this for 70, 80 years, 90 years, 100 years. They've been working on it since back in the 1800s, so and so. They've been working on this plan. They didn't have the technology. Now the technology, everything's sort of hopefully for them coming together to create an AI society, depopulate the planet, all these crazy, insane ideas. But as long as we accept it, they're fine with it. And it's based on acceptance. So the moment we start to see we can create something new in our understanding and how to get to the higher jurisdictions are what the spiritual world wants from us. They don't want us to accept this, but as long as we don't come, this is the freedom moment, you know, they let us be free. Freedom hurts. Freedom means wake up. Freedom means stand on your own feet. They're not putting the pacifiers in our mouth, the spiritual world. The spiritual beings are letting us be free. We have to be thankful for the freedom, but we have to take it as responsibility. So the next step in society is only going to come if we want a future that is the next step where mankind, based on an understanding of himself, these three spheres, we think, we feel, we have a will sphere, we have a relationship to the higher worlds. Based on these kind of things, simple understandings, but introspective observations, we can start to say, what kind of society do these individuals need? What are our needs? Not just me sitting here, my ego, but on a bigger, broader spectrum, and start to build it. I think it's so powerful to have ideas that are showing the future.
Oh, thank you. No, that was a beautiful way to end it. I still have a lot of questions I would like to ask, but maybe we have to talk again some other time because there's a lot in this. And also, I think maybe I can just sort of round that up there, Diane, because another point that I put here on my paper that was this thing about, like, how do we in this time, when we then see it, then we see, okay, what's going out here is really sick, it's not healthy. How do we then create something new without going so against it that we're just ending up creating more duality, like banging against each other? And I think what you just explained here, a lot of the things that actually everything that you said is a really good way of doing that, because what it's really about is not going against what is, but creating something new and seeing through what is going on, of course, but not going into war with it, just saying, thank you for your offer, not for me. I built a different community over here. You can come and join if you behave, but otherwise, then it's. I really think that that's really, really important for us to remember in this time, so that we don't, as I just said, create more split instead of unity. And this is, So thank you so much for sharing all this, because I think this is exactly one road to it. And earlier, when I was just about to interrupt you, was because you mentioned these, when you talked about Trump, that he took away this TTE system, or I don't know what it is. I was like, maybe, is it like some economic system stuff, or what are these?
I'm sure you can still find it on the internet, because Obama had said in some speeches that was one of his main goals, to have it implemented. Okay. But it started before Obama, so it wasn't it was TIP, I think, was the Trans International Partnership, and TTIP, the one was between America and Asia, TIP, and TTIP was planned for America with Europe, the remains of Europe. Okay. So, and that was to create trade agreements and trade partnerships based on also, for example, off-continent courts. For example, so that the courts that would decide any disagreements in trade weren't in the countries anymore. So it was a radical, even more radical than, well, not more radical than Corona, but it was a very radical erasing the sovereignty of nations. So the nations wouldn't be able to decide anymore. Like, for one example, is Germany could not decide to get out of atomic power without having to pay. So I may be wrong, but I did read at least 2 times that Germany had to pay astronomical sums, even in the present situation, to the companies who had planned to make money on atomic power, because they want to get out. So they had to pay damages. So if a country, by any laws, made it impossible for a company, I mean a country, which is a company now, but a country was trying to make it impossible for another company to make money, they could be called to pay damages for taking away profits. Does that make sense? So it was international trade agreements based on erasing of sovereign laws. So sovereign laws were being superseded, should have been entirely superseded by the TTIP and the TIP. the courts for deciding any kind of discussions were offshore. And also one of the main things was we, the purple, we would not know what these laws were until 25 years. They were passing legislation, trying to get past legislation that we wouldn't even know about for 25 years. I believe that Trump stopped this. So he became very unpopular.
Yeah.
That made him unpopular from the beginning in these kind of globalist activities. But even if this sounds very horrific, I mean, in Germany, there were big protests about TTIP. There were 1 million people in Berlin at one time, I believe, or 100,000. There were really huge protests. Here in Denmark, I didn't hear a thing. But in parts of Europe, there was quite a lot of protests going on because it was going to really be a very destructive for all industry and local European trade and so on. So it would have been a huge disaster. But of course, we got Corona on top or instead. I don't know how much of TTIP was actually implemented, which they got through, but I know that he tried to stop a lot of it. But we have this anyway. I mean, the European Union is similar. It's when I lived in Switzerland, for example, I read that I think 40, what was it? They said 40%. No, it was 40,000 laws. If Switzerland joined the European Union, 40,000 laws would be erased because the European Union says our laws are higher than your laws. Who told them to make laws that were higher than the local laws? But they try to make a jurisdiction which is higher than any local laws. So that means that if Denmark decides tomorrow, we do not want this poison on our fields, we cannot make the decision if the European Union says, you have to have glyphosate in your country, because our laws are less than their laws. So the TTIP was also an attempt to make higher, stronger commercial jurisdictions.
I miss Trump.
What?
I said I miss Trump.
Well, if he did that, that was positive.
Yeah, I mean, if he did that, it was really positive.
Mm.
Thank you, Diane. I am aware that we almost spoke for 2 hours. This is the longest.
Let's hope some people listen for 2 hours.
Yes, me too. It was really, thank you. I've written down a lot of notes here on my paper. And as I said, I will put the links near this video. And
yeah, we have seminars coming up. And
yeah, I'll put the link for that also so people can join.
And there's little work groups starting, which is nice. Independent groups to start to work on health sector, schools, agriculture. This is great. So I think we need a lot of these things.
Both in Skanderborg where you are and also in Copenhagen? Or?
Yes, small group in Copenhagen, but here we're going to start doing more regular groups and keep working.
Amazing. I'll put all the links so people, the message can get out.
Great. Thanks so much, Sophie.
Thank you.
It was really enjoyable. I enjoyed speaking with you and hope that it gives something for people to think about.
Yeah, me too. And we'll keep working.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
See you soon, Dan. Bye.